Hi everybody!
Hello.
Hi Tahel!
Hi Gil.
How are you doing?
Very good. I'm very happy to be here.
Super psyched to have you. So we're gonna talk about a light subject, the Holocaust.
Yeah, very light.
Very light. You are a Holocaust researcher
Yes, I am.
from the Hebrew
University.
University of Jerusalem, right?
Indeed.
And you're wrapping up your master's.
Yeah, in cultural studies.
Okay, cultural studies. Okay, so I want to read you a question by one of our viewers. Okay. But he asked, and please answer honestly. Are you guys still bitter about that whole Holocaust thing?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. I read it out loud to like 20, 30 people, and your reaction is actually the universal reaction. This is so funny. It's so funny. It's so funny.
No, we are not over that thing. Absolutely not.
No, I'm still bitter.
Still bitter about that thing. Still bitter. Can you blame us?
I mean, okay. And you have a very interesting and very specific research about the Holocaust, because the Holocaust, that's huge.
A huge topic.
A huge topic.
Definitely.
And you told me, I think before, that there are 100,000 books already written about the Holocaust.
Yeah, more than 100,000 books. It's insanely diverse. A lot of research about the Holocaust has been done. Absolutely.
Okay, so you chose a super specific topic.
Yes.
What is it?
Normal lives of SS perpetrators. So in the Holocaust, the perpetrators of the violence were SS soldiers belonging to the SS army unit. These perpetrators used to live right next to where they perpetrated the violence, so next to concentration camps and death camps, and they would form small communities next to these concentration camps.
Because they had to live somewhere.
Yeah, so they had to live somewhere, but they lived right next to it, and they would bring their families from Germany, and their families would live there next to the camp with them. So it was a normal day job, and they would go every day to work in the concentration camp or in the administration building, and then come back in the evening every night.
Home.
Yeah, honey, I'm home, let's have dinner, etc.
Okay.
So what I'm interested in is microhistory.
Microhistory.
Yes.
Means?
So it means in popular history, we are very much used to sort of thinking about very big narratives, right? Very big stories. We want to know the history of how the Nazi regime came to power, how Stalin came to power, especially in modern history. And what I want to do is look at very specific and small instances, because I think there is some truth to these very small, mundane moments. So one of the very interesting things that I found was that, well, most SS soldiers were just low-ranking soldiers. So you had thousands of soldiers that were just sitting in barracks all day, and this sort of became their way of life, their normal way of life. So you could go to the cinema in the evening, but you would go to sleep with another 500 soldiers in the barracks with you. The interesting thing is that the more that you became responsible for administration of mass atrocities, the more you were pushed forward in the SS ranks, becoming an officer, a higher ranking officer, etc., you would be rewarded with this option for family life. So you could get married and bring your wife to, sort of bring your family with you, or form a new family, a new Aryan family.
So you had an incentive to be evil.
Yeah, exactly. Also fulfill this ideological thing of making a racially pure family life right next to the camp. And this was
intertwined.
And this was, you were like sort of building a fort. Inside the camp, you had all the racially inferior groups, but outside the camp, you had the strongest thing possible. The strong German Aryan family, the racially pure Aryan family, right outside the gates of the camp. This was the first threshold of the civilization, the first threshold of the Lebensraum, of the living space for the Aryan people. And it was first inhabited not by soldiers. They were important, but they weren't as important as these racially pure families that were sort of, living the Nazi dream right outside the gates of the camp.
So let's dive into your research.
So
there's a neighborhood near a concentration camp. What are like the most basic characteristics of this neighborhood that are different from any other neighborhood anywhere else with SS people, let's say?
In my research, I handle two places. So one concentration camp is Mauthausen, which is located in Austria, next to Linz. And Mauthausen,
where Hitler was
born, yeah. It was a very Hitler city, and all that area was a very National Socialist place.
Okay.
It's very supportive of Hitler. And Mauthausen actually...
I disapprove of Hitler.
Bad.
I'm gonna take this very controversial stance. Hitler, bad.
Bad. In the neighborhood in Mauthausen, the SS neighborhood was a very important link in the normalization of the concentration camp violence. So you have to understand that the violence was very much present in the space of the Mauthausen town next to the concentration camp.
Okay, they
They heard, they saw. At first, when the prisoners would come, they would come to the train station and they would march through the city into the concentration camp.
So you
have to understand, it's a city it's a little town with 1,000 people, and all of a sudden you get every day thousands of people coming to the train station, walking to the concentration camp.
Through the town.
And at first this was looked at as something very weird. People would come out from their houses to look at these parades of people coming in. But slowly this thing became normalized. It became something regular. It became something normal. And when the SS families started to come, they came with what I like to call the domestic respectability, the familiar respectability. So the family as an institution is a very strong thing, specifically also in Germany and specifically under National Socialism, which viewed the family as something very important. The Aryan family with many children, working the fields, doing agriculture.
Right, it's very romanticized.
Yeah, very romanticized.
They gave it respectability?
They gave it respectability because, look, this is something that is happening, but here come these SS families, the families of the men who belong to the superior caste of the Aryan people. They come and they support their SS men in their special national mission. And they come with this very symbolic meaning to the family. And they see these families sort of settling in town. And, you know, a family is something very normal. It's something that belongs to peacetime, right? It's something that really normalizes what goes on in the camp. And so the local town, the local population see these families settling into the homes, their beautiful homes that the German government built for them over there. And it's something, you know, this is very normal. This is a day job that's happening. In the SS neighborhood in Mauthausen, this was a very important link in the normalization. And if you want to talk about the humanity of these people, there is one story that is always, it gives me the chills just to tell you this, but there was an SS officer and he was an execution officer. So he would work in Block 11, that's a very infamous block where they would torture, in Auschwitz, where they would torture people, they execute political prisoners, Jews, etc. This guy's name was SS officer Platzlich. He had a wife. And they moved to the neighborhood in 1940 together, and they were very much in love, really in love. They had a Polish housemaiden, and she sort of saw their relationship and what happened between them, and she really described them as this young couple very much in love. And they had a baby, and then they had another baby, and you know, this guy in the meanwhile is executing dozens of people every day. And one time, prisoners decided they want to take revenge on him. So what they did is take his uniform and they put it for a few days in the infirmary where people with typhus were held. And he came back home with the uniform that were full of, you know, the disease. And his wife contracted typhus from contact with him. And
the baby?
No, the babies were fine. They were already 3 and 4. So what happened was that after his wife died a few weeks later, which he loved very much, he came back home and sort of the Polish woman witnessed how he told the children that their mother was gone, how he broke down and cried, and you know, and this is like a very human story, you know, but this man was
horrible person.
He was a horrible person, you know. He executed thousands of people. He tortured thousands of people. But then you go and you see this very humane part of him. He loved his wife. He had children. He had a family there. And I think this is why I do this, because I want to see the complexity of evil, right? So at first, you're shocked.
Right.
You know, how do I make sense of this thing? How do I make sense of this man? How do I make sense of his love to his wife?
Right.
You know, we're so used to think about people, horrible people, and just,
right.
you know, as monsters. But all of a sudden, this monster becomes this man.
Right.
And this is exactly what I'm trying to do, to see the human side of this grotesque, brutal evilness, and sort of see how regular people are regular even when they are this horrible, this bad. Mauthausen was built in 1938 after the Anschluss, after Hitler decided to incorporate Austria into the Third Reich. There was a concentration camp architecture. Their main labor was granite stone. So a lot of the buildings in Mauthausen were built out of this granite stone, and this also affected the constructions of the homes of the SS soldiers and their families.
Okay. So they took stone that the prisoners quarried, whatever,
yeah,
and
for
they
free. I have to say, just because
that's another piece of injustice.
Yeah, it really a lot of construction projects in Berlin, in Vienna, are made from stones from Mauthausen and from Flossenburg, which was another concentration camp.
Okay.
It was mined in horrible conditions. Very, very brutal, very horrible. A lot of men lost their lives there. A lot of, mainly Soviet prisoners of war.
Jews or not only Jews?
In Mauthausen there were Jews, but they only arrived around 1944.
Okay.
So pretty late, but I have to say that all the concentration camps in Germany and in Austria, especially in the early years, they didn't have a lot of Jews in them. They had mostly political prisoners, asocials, which is criminals, prostitutes.
Why though? Why the Jews only came later?
Because the Jews were mostly concentrated to the party. Yeah, they joined the party really late.
Are you coming now?
Come on, you come now. It's already the end. No, but they came very late because the Jews were usually concentrated in Eastern European camps, in death camps, and they had much harsher conditions usually. And the Inner Reich concentration camps, they usually had the other types of prisoners. What I wanted to do actually was to sort of compare, because I chose this Mauthausen neighborhood and I compared it to the Auschwitz SS neighborhood. And why I wanted to
Auschwitz is the main death camp.
Yes.
In Poland.
Yeah, where over 3 million Jews were killed. So, were gassed, yeah. Why I wanted to do this is there were very different perceptions of...
What in a place,
there was a big difference between the two places. In a place that was considered German, Aryan, they could associate themselves in the town, they would go out to bars, they would date local women, they would marry them, they would make babies with them, etc.
But in Poland?
But in Poland it wasn't that way because these were inferior populations. Right. So the neighborhood was like this autarkic place. You had about 50 families living there in homes evacuated from their previous Polish owners, and it was a very, very small community with a lot of visitors.
Wow.
And you have to remember that...
Sounds like a dystopia.
It's a dystopia, absolutely. In Auschwitz, from 1940, when the camp was erected, to 1945, when it was liberated, you had about 8,000 SS men who served there.
That's not that much, that many.
It's a lot.
It's a lot?
It's a lot, yeah.
Why? There was a high turnover rate? They weren't happy?
There was a high turn. Also, there was this punishment for SS soldiers who didn't do their jobs right. They would be sent to the front to fight.
And doing the job right, meaning being very
as cruel as possible and being a bureaucrat and playing the game.
So if you weren't malicious enough, you were sent to the front, to the Eastern Front?
Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes, yeah. And in Auschwitz, this was a very important thing for the SS men themselves and the families themselves, and in sort of providing a normal frame of life to these SS men, right? The SS men were usually busy with the administration of mass atrocities, the administration of genocide.
What does it mean, administration? Like they were bureaucrats, or they were actually doing the pushing into the gas chambers.
What you said actually resonates. There's a book written by Rudolf Hess. He was the commandant of Auschwitz concentration camp. And in the book, he describes how he felt that what he was doing was really a horrible job, but it was very much necessary. And this is what made him one time push a little girl into the gas chambers. And he writes this, you know. And
he himself went to push
himself, the commandant of Auschwitz, you know. So we are very much, I think, also the imagination of the Holocaust. We are used to sort of viewing them as bureaucrats, as desk murderers, right? They were behind desks. They were just, you know, Eichmann was just conducting trains. This train goes there and this train goes there.
First count, nature of offense, crime against the Jewish people.
April 1961, 16 years after the end of World War II. A Nazi colonel named Adolf Eichmann stood trial in Israel for his part in the Holocaust.
During the period 1939 to 1945, caused the killing of millions of Jews.
A master planner of what the Nazis called the final solution, their plan to eradicate Europe's Jews.
Kann ich nur sagen,
so far as this question is concerned, I can only say that I never killed anyone. I did it reluctantly, but I had to obey orders. I had to do it.
But the everyday reality of the camp was very brutal. It was very violent. It was horrible, and there was no way to go around it.
Right.
There was no way to...
It seeps into who you are, and then you go home, it's still there.
It's impossible to separate these two spaces, the concentration camp space and the home. So violence relentlessly penetrates the home all the time. And
how, for example?
For example, so prisoners would work in the homes. So there was a Siedlungsbau, so that was...
Of course.
What was that?
Of course there was. No, I knew what you're talking about.
Siedlungsbau Kommando, so it was a special unit of people, of prisoners who would go from house to house and they would paint and they would remodel and an electrician would come and they would work for...
They were slaves.
Yeah, they were slaves for these SS families. They also had prisoners working in the gardens and prisoners building the roads. And so prisoners were just inside the space of the neighborhood all the time.
Painting your house.
Painting your house, and it could not be, you know, contaminated in one place. And this created all kinds of situations inside the home. So in Auschwitz, for example, I've read a few very interesting testimonies made by Polish women who worked as housemaidens for the SS families. One Polish woman told that the mother of an SS officer came to the concentration camp to visit the family of her son. She came from Germany. And she was shocked because their window would overlook the train station. And she saw all the transports of Jews coming into the train station, and she just stood.
Coming out.
Transports would arrive to the train station. There would be dogs barking, screaming. People would be shot on the train station. So you could see really the first glance of brutality of coming into the camp.
And it can be better inside.
So she would see this, you know, the mother of the SS officer just stood there and she saw the whole thing and she couldn't take her eyes off the train station the whole day. And after the day passed and her son came home, she said to her son, "I cannot believe you are doing this and I'm going home now."
Really?
Yeah, right. And this is something that also works a little bit counter to what we would think that a German woman, that her son is an SS officer would react.
She should be proud. Whatever.
Yeah.
But why don't you want to be judgmental?
I think that...
You can judge Nazis, I think.
You can judge that.
The neo-Nazi movement? It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
And you think that judgment will inhibit your ability to look at all angles?
Putting a hold on the judgment and first examining it in a very analytical way from very various different angles, it helps you to get to a more refined truth or interpretation of what happened. So I try to look at normal people, ordinary people, and their lives and how they interpreted their surroundings and history itself, and sort of made sense out of it. And what I want to see is not only how sort of social constraints, time constraints operate on people. I want to look at how people interpret these constraints, these big things happening to them. And I believe that you can do this only by looking at very small instances, at very small things. So family life, everyday life, these things.
How do you live? How do you adapt to the changing political landscape, which
Exactly.
was very extreme. In their case, they were right there.
Yeah, they were right there, and they were
This is
ideological soldiers. The SS was the
Right.
elite caste of
Right.
the Nazi regime.
It's not the army, the general army.
It's not the general army. It's a special unit inside the army run by Himmler. And this special unit was a very elite caste, very ideological soldiers. And so it's very interesting to see how they reacted to their surroundings, how they changed what they did through very small, minuscule interpretation.
Because Nazis, like it or not, they are people too.
Yes.
Right, they are not monsters.
Become kind of a symbol.
Is the point to understand the human side of the monsters, or to understand how humans can become monsters?
How humans can become monsters and how they can sustain this
Right.
monsterness.
Without feeling that they are monstrous.
Yeah.
How do they do that, so? How do they do that?
Really what happened was that at first when the Nazis started to kill the Jews in the killing pits in Eastern Europe,
Right.
this was a very intimate, up close and personal way of killing people.
Right.
So
it's harder emotionally.
they would line the Jews up in front of the pit and they would shoot them. And these perpetrators of violence would have tremendous emotional breakdowns.
Right, they were drunk and stuff.
But they would sort of lose their minds, you know. So he cannot have perpetrators doing this very important service for Germany, right?
Right.
Losing their minds and having psychological breakdowns. There was sort of this domestication of violence,
You have
right?
to clean
Let's
it up.
move it, take the idea that was already forming from the 1930s in Germany, and we'll move that into the East and sort of, you know, far away from Germany. What it did do is sort of make the psychological damage smaller, because the SS men, they could go after work to their barracks if they were from lower ranks, or to their homes with their families if they were from the higher ranks, and just live sort of their normal life and they had recreational facilities. So they had a cinema, a casino, a brothel, shops. There was an SS hotel in Auschwitz. There was this whole construction of life.
Holocaust industry,
but you know, the Holocaust show business. I don't know. But there was an option to lead this full life outside of work, outside of the daily work of violence. Maintaining the violence, sustaining it, making sure that it will be able to happen for months and years.
I have to tell you this. So you sent me before, like your summary of your thesis, and now as we're talking, it's very depressing. It's very depressing. I have to be honest.
It's very depressing,
and it's hard to digest. Maybe more so than just like reading details of what happened in the Holocaust. I don't know, like it.
Yeah.
So doesn't that seep into your life? All this, because it's also normal if you just read about monsters doing some horrible shit. So okay, that's over there. That's in the past. But you are normal.
Yeah. So I think, well, first of all, I feel very passionate towards my research, because I think it talks about something very humane. And it's about how evil sort of happens in our lives, and how also very extreme forms of evil can be really routinized, you know. And I think about all kinds of examples that are parallel to this. For instance, slavery. You know, slaves used to live in the homes of their masters, right? The broader questions of, or cultural questions of how violence is normalized, and the relationship between normalcy and violence, which is very deceptive, right? We can see something, it looks very normal, right? But if we know what goes on behind this normalcy, next to this normalcy, then we can sort of reevaluate how we judge things as normal. And we can look at normalcy as this very fragile thing, as this thing that
you have to work very hard
that
to maintain it.
You have to work very hard to maintain it, and boundaries need to be worked on very hard to maintain them. And I think it's really, really important, because we are so used to looking at normalcy in our everyday lives and saying, oh, okay, I don't want to give it a second thought. I don't want to think what's behind this normalcy.
What's in the sausage?
Yeah, what's in the sausage, you know? Exactly.
You're not vegan.
I'm not actually.
Because when I was reading it, and as we are talking, I'm always thinking of course, I'm not comparing blah, 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 whatever. But you have to normalize also this violence.
I think about it sometimes.
And
I
put
do
it
think
behind
about it.
the walls, and then there's also a family thing. Let's gather and eat this thing that was born out of violence. This animal, we killed this animal, but now there's a whole ceremony. You give it to your kids.
All kinds of people, they sort of choose their battles. Your interpretation is this very contemporary, because vegan is this thing that people are thinking about. But for me, it's like thinking about the conflict, or you have to choose your.
Why you can be both a vegan and be for ending the conflict. Think about it.
Yeah. Okay. I'll think about it. But it's very important also to maintain a sense of bewilderment, right? Of saying, wow, this is crazy. This is something so hard to understand, so hard to comprehend, this type of violence, this type of things. I've always felt that the more I read about the Holocaust, the less I understood, right? Okay. And I still, this emotion still accompanies me, and it really maintains a sense of curiosity towards what I'm doing, right? Because I think I understand it, and then I read something that makes me think that I really don't understand it. And it's this process of understanding, misunderstanding, understanding, misunderstanding. It keeps happening all the time. And I think that's what's fascinating about the Holocaust. It's really important to understand these mechanisms. And there is a moral question behind this about violence and how violence happens, and how people that are normal, that are you and me, they can perpetrate these horrible things, right? But I think Israelis are very much used to thinking about the Holocaust as a very singular thing, right? A thing that happened outside of history, and
happened to us.
Yeah, happened to us, and this is a very special thing that cannot happen to anyone. And
never again.
And never again. Also,
explain that never again thing a little bit.
So I think Israelis, they've come to the conclusion that this
is what they were fucking taught.
That this should never happen again. The problem is that for many Israelis, it's a thing that this should never happen again to us.
Right.
And
so
we don't really care about what happens to other people, right?
Because then now the Palestinians and the Arabs and Iranians, now they are the Nazis.
Yeah.
We are always the victims.
And there are patterns that you can look at that are similar between those cases. And it's so very important to look at these patterns, because how can we learn from history, right? How can we prevent the next mass atrocity?
So
how
we have
can
to
we
learn how the process started in order to stop it.
And in Israel, people don't like that.
No.
In Israel, people don't like that.
No.
They want to view the Holocaust as a very singular thing, a thing that happened to the Jews. It's nothing like any other. And in some respects, it's true. The scale of it, the industrialization of mass murder. But still, it's so very important to look at these similarities, because this is the way that we can prevent the next mass atrocity from happening. And what I'm hoping is that people will take from that, a moral lesson, and think about themselves also in everyday life, right? In mundane situations, in what happens to them in their own countries. And stand up against, what's evil in their own way, right? And anybody can do anything.
Right.
So.
And I think it's much easier when you learn history and learn about other things that have happened, because it's harder if you're just so in it to look at it like from an objective point of view. If you learn, okay, this is similar to this and that and that.
Going to visit other places is so important.
Then you go back.
If you want to take a look at yourself, that's a very basic anthropological insight, right?
Right. I think people don't understand that the Holocaust is almost, there's like a daily reminder almost in our politics, everything we compare to the Holocaust. And one of the most infuriating
very much politicized.
Very much politicized.
Yeah.
And one of the most infuriating things for me is that for, a decade, whenever the Prime Minister goes to speak in the National Memorial Day of the Holocaust,
he talks about Iran
or the Palestinians, they never actually talk about the actual Holocaust. Even Olmert, before Bibi, he would say, we are just because this has happened to us. And of course, he's talking about the conflict. Like Bibi, for political reasons, he even went so far to deny Hitler's responsibility for the Holocaust by blaming some mufti.
Yeah.
But
it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. It's not knowing history at all. It's really...
He knows history and he's lying. And then the Stirber, whatever, like the website Daily Storm or whatever, they were like, yeah, Bibi said that Hitler wasn't responsible for the Holocaust.
Already the right wing in Germany are like, riding on this thing. But
and then Angela Merkel had to go on record and say, no,
guys, relax.
It was us. Take
it's
responsibility
ridiculous.
again.
Angela Merkel was she rectified the situation. I mean, what's going on?
We stand by German responsibility for the Holocaust. We stand by German responsibility for the Holocaust.
Okay.
This is all we have left. It's really
incredible. Okay. Thank you, Tahel.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you for having me. I was happy to be here.
I was very happy that you're here. And it was less depressing than I thought it would be.
Was it?
Depressing. Yes, less depressing. So maybe, how did you feel about this conversation coming from two Israeli Jews that we feel comfortable
joking about
the Holocaust? You cannot.
Yeah, you cannot. It's only for Jews.
Only for Jews. If you're half Jew, if you're like a half.
I don't know.
So make like a half a joke.
Right, half a joke is allowed.
Is allowed. That's it.
That's it.
So thank you. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.